Very warm welcome to our She's on Q today, and thank you for attending. My name is Anne Finney and I'm the Chief Risk Officer at Q Super. So firstly, on behalf of Q Super, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where QUT stands, pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continue to play within our community. It is my pleasure today to introduce Bianca Hartge-Hazelman. Bianca is on a fearless mission to improve the economic well-being of women by providing data insights that are both educational and awareness-raising on the challenges and opportunities affecting girls and women. So Bianca is an entrepreneur and financial journalist who has had a long career in Australia's financial markets, business activities and economics. In 2016, Bianca took a voluntary redundancy from Fairfax Media to create the women's money content hub financy.com.au, and a year later launched the economic progress benchmark, the Financy Women's Index. The vision for both initiatives came from a place of fear, a bizarre admission but an honest one. The fear came from reading too much negative news on the social and economic disadvantages women face compared to men globally, and then looking in her daughter's eyes and wondering how can we all make things better. Bianca has 3 daughters and is driven to make a positive change for future generations. Please join me in welcoming Bianca.
I'm so excited to be here. It's really lovely to be back in Brisbane because we recently moved back to Sydney and I'm very excited to be back. I'm very excited. Plus it's a lot warmer. Bear with me in this presentation. I'm multitasking on the laptop and pressing this button. Hopefully I get them in sync at the same time. What is women's economic empowerment? You hear it bandied around a bit. For me, it is about financial well-being, a woman's financial well-being. It's about supporting their financial literacy, supporting their financial growth, supporting their financial progress. It's what I'm absolutely most passionate about in this life. I'm passionate about it as a career. I'm passionate about it as a mum. I've made it my life's work. I'm a big believer that if you can improve a woman's economic circumstance, then you can improve the world. But to get there, we face a number of challenges, and as it stands, here's some of them, which hopefully I'm doing the right amount of time. The global labour force participation rate for women is 63% versus 94% for men. So this is largely due to career breaks. Women work less than men in the paid workforce globally. The global gender wage gap, which we hear a lot about anyway, but I'm putting this up here today, 23%. I'll tell you what it is in a minute in Australia. You probably already heard it, but we'll go there. Women tend to spend about 2.5 more times work in unpaid work than men. Only a very small percentage of women are CEOs on the world's largest listed companies. And the economic costs are a reflection of the human and social costs to the global economy for discriminatory social institutions and violence against women, including financial abuse, is estimated to equate to about $12 trillion annually. It's a big deal. For me, all of these things inspire my why I want to make a difference. Supporting the economic progress of women creates a direct path towards gender equality, poverty eradication, inclusive economic growth, and, in my view, happier people. Now, there are some barriers and enablers to a woman's financial progress. You probably live and breathe these, or you know people that do, but it's important to call them out. For me, through the research that I do through the Women's Index and as a journalist writing all the time on Women's Money Matters, education, you earn what you learn. I'm a huge believer in that your education doesn't stop. And I don't just mean formal education, I mean the networks, coming here today, your personal investment. Employment is the other critical enabler of a woman's financial progress, that ability to earn an income, that ability to save, to prepare for retirement. The barriers to a woman's financial progress that we tend to see a lot of happen as a result of career breaks, unpaid work, undervalued work, outdated workforce thinking, gender stereotypes in work and at home, business as well. Now, did I just miss that slide and talk right through it? Let me just go back and have a look. So these are just to make that really clear what the enablers are, because I'll be talking about those as we kind of skip through. Call me out if I've missed a slide. But I like this slide, so we'll move on. Women have come a long way over the past 100 years. We weren't quite, I don't know if we were quite stooped down like that in the Victorian era. I think I got that one a little bit wrong, but here we go. We were first allowed to vote around the 1900s. About 70 years later, we had this granted equal pay in Australia, and we'll mark that day next week with Equal Pay Day. Many people are getting excited about that. In recent, and perhaps the most unprecedented amount of most recent social empowerment, I feel, has come about because of your Me Too, your Time Up movement. All of these things have kind of created a hyper level of excitement around gender equality and debate and around reports and corporate responsibility. So there's been a lot of talk happening really since 2017, and that's covered my period as a journalist in this area, and it also for me gave rise to the Women's Index as I was trying to make sense of all this data that just felt like a lot of noise to me, and I was trying to get my head around, are women going forward or are we going backwards to the dark ages? What's actually happening for women? Where do we sit? How can we progress? These were questions going around in my head. What affects women in their path to progress as we move on, as we try to move on, is this question mark over fear. And I talk about that, and I've experienced it very personally, and I hope you don't mind me making an assumption that many of you may have also experienced this, or you know people that do, where you just have this voice inside you that questions your ability to, or it's external from someone else. You can't do that because of this, or you can't juggle this much, it's all a bit too much. It's the voices that we say to ourselves, it's the things that we say to ourselves that have a huge impact on our own financial progress, on our ability to make the most of education, of employment, those critical enablers, and that can keep us stuck in the things that will hold us back. And for me, I was asked just a minute ago, how did I get out? How did I come up with this? How did I get there? I hit a horrible place that I suffered bad with anxiety about 4 years ago after the birth of my second daughter. I was constantly, thoughts just running around in my head, sleep deprived, feeding a really small baby, just trying to get her to progress. I'm using that word a lot, but to grow, because she was so underweight, that I just felt so depressed, really depressed, fearful of the life that I brought this little girl into, and hearing all these headlines about gender equality and isn't it unfair and all these different things. And I thought, I just felt like hitting the floor and just staying there. I brought this little girl into this world, and the world feels horrible. And you know, when you're negative, everything feels horrible. You can't get out of it. It was just an inescapable place for me, and it was a place I didn't want to stay in because I felt I was wasting time in it. I was on board this negative train, and I needed to get off the station. The way out of it for me was using the fear to write, and to finally listening to that voice inside of me that my news editors at Fairfax were telling me, oh, we're not interested in women's money columns, we're not there. I just decided to leave and start my own, and to face that fear, because I couldn't keep doing the same anymore. I had to try and make a difference for these little girls, and it makes me very emotional, but I had to make a difference for myself because I also wasn't living my own truth as well. So what I want to talk a little bit about today, and if you walk away with nothing else at this, it's just a matter of using any fear you have that's stopping or blocking your financial progress to chip away at, to motivate, to inspire your financial progress, be it in education, employment, speaking up, speaking out, just using it to drive yourself forward. It's really powerful when you can do it, but it's bloody hard work getting yourself there. But I hope to give you something to help. So amidst all this looking at women's money and writing columns, it's all going quite good, I was struggling with all the data that was out there around women's inequality, domestic violence, abuse, pay gaps, a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there. You probably, I don't know, some women, older women say to me, oh, we've heard it all before, Bianca, blah, 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 but it is a bit more heightened now. I would say it is at its most heightened right now in terms of media coverage. And what I've done with the Women's Index is try to bring a lot of statistics together to create a picture, a scorecard, if you will, on how women are progressing financially. Are we going forward or are we going backwards? How do we compare with men? What can we learn? What can we do better? What are the opportunities here? So the index looks at what women are studying from the moment they leave school to what courses they go into, to employment, underemployment, underutilisation, part-time, full-time, where they are in corporate boards, what's the representation like, and how much they have in superannuation. Putting all this together and basically giving you a score. It's reviewed by a number of economists, 50% men, 50% women, female economists, some of the top economists in the country. And it's reviewed by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and it's about 12,000 words per quarter, and usually leaves me with a bit of a twitch in the eye, if I'm really honest about it. Why? But I do it because you get all this data. We know that 25% of Australian women have no super. The current superannuation gender gap is at 28%. That's actually narrowed this quarter. This is a good thing. We're not hearing enough about this. It still means that women have 28% less super than men. But what's happened this quarter is quite interesting. I'll talk about that. It's getting better, and I like to focus on the positive. The unpaid portion of women's total work. So instead of just looking at unpaid work and dealing with a lot of people that say, well, of course we do more unpaid work because men tend to do more full-time work, which is statistically true. What we've done is we've added up the amount of unpaid work and added to the amount of paid work, and we've still found there's a gap with the total portion, with women doing more work overall compared to men. But when you look at the unpaid portion of it, of that total figure, about 62% of our time is spent on average in unpaid work. The gender pay gap, so when we talked a moment ago about the global gender pay gap at 23%, in Australia it's sitting at about 14, meaning 14% less we're earning than men. There's always a lot of debate about that. We can talk about it. It's largely affected by the number of women in full-time work. We have 3.27 million women in full-time work at the moment. That's moderated in the recent quarter. It had just been going up and up and up, and we've seen that kind of just drop off a little bit. 29.7% is the number to reflect the number of women on the top ASX 200 boards. They have been pushing, companies have been pushing to get to this magic 30% figure. We seem to have been gotten quite close to it over the past nine months, but we're just not getting over it. And then graduate salaries gap. The moment women are graduating from university, they're faced with this gap straight out of the box. And that's despite women enrolling in tertiary studies at a much higher rate than men. So there's something going on there. And it's a matter of looking at this data, and instead of just reporting the headlines that you see, it's kind of asking questions, why? What are we seeing? What can we learn? How can we educate people? How can we educate men and women, be better at inclusion? I'm a big believer in you can't achieve financial equality without inclusion, without involving men. I can't be here today without the help of the men on this board, without my husband. I'm a huge believer in inclusion. Now, when we look at what the index looks like as a chart, this is what it is. Because I do have some people say to me, what is the women's index really? Can we do a man's index as well? Well, maybe. I actually think there's probably already one out there, but maybe we'll look into it. So as it stands, women, the pace of progress, if we just go back from December 2016, the pace of progress has been up, a little bit down, up, and then just gradually getting up and up and up, bit by bit, quarter by quarter. What's good about this is we're progressing, we're moving forward. Great. What's worrying me in this quarter in particular, and what I've been talking about a lot in the media, is the pace of progress over the financial year is actually slower than it was in the previous financial year. That's something we don't really want to see, but it's good to see it because we need to ask the question, why? What's going on here? The yellow bar reflects, well, what would economic equality look like if we were completely benchmarked against men? Now, now this is debatable, whether or not you think economic equality is being completely benchmarked to men, or you think that we'll end up going on this other path, which I tend to think we might, given the workforce model is changing so rapidly. What that bar says nonetheless is based on those numbers and the annual compound rate of growth of progress that we're seeing, women are about 45 years from achieving economic equality. So that's a generation and a half for me. That's hopefully I have grandkids and I'll get to see that. But I'm not happy with that because I actually want that for people now. I want that for younger generations. I want that for girls and for boys to live in that kind of society. I want that for economic growth, for business growth. So that's a worry. Now, it might get you to just breathe here because data can just make you feel a bit like it's just, you got to breathe. At the end of the day, these are just numbers, but think of it as the picture of progress. And it matters because if we're not measuring and tracking the economic progress, then we can't fix the issues and we can't present a case for why this matters, because it's very easy to shoot down statistics with other statistics and things like that. But when you start pulling them all together into a picture and saying it's doing this, it becomes a little bit harder to argue that we don't have an issue, and I believe we have an issue. So the annual pace of progress was affected in this quarter, particularly by a moderation in the rate of full-time employment among women, so less women moving into full-time work, and little improvement in corporate boards. So you can't be what you can't see. We don't have as many women in those top board positions as we would like to see. Progress was, however, helped by a record narrowing in the superannuation gender gap, helped by a narrowing in the pay gap. Those two things talk to each other. And small declines in female underemployment and unpaid work. But what I really want to give you today, apart from all the stats, is how it affects you, your progress, what you can do to make a difference for yourself. Now, some of these things are going to be obvious, but some of them might not be. The biggest thing about it is and the reason why we do the Women's Index quarterly, it's reminding you to motivate women and policymakers, decision makers, companies, that these issues matter, but if we keep getting it out in the open and talking about it, we actually can affect change just by chipping away. So the 4 key life stages for a woman, as I see it and as I look through a lot of this data, involve, you're starting out in your career, straight out of high school or into university studies or straight into the workforce. Then there's the career phase. This might continue forever for you. Or you have a career break, which is, the life calls part 3. That might come sooner rather than later for you. That might not come. Where you sit in this life cycle is relevant to you and only you. So you take what you want from different parts. There's no right or wrong here as to how you can help yourself as long as you're helping yourself. So when you're starting out, a woman, the ways to really get ahead, I believe, are to get financially organised early, whether those conversations you're having with your daughters, your friends, yourself, and doing that by understanding what you're earning, what's coming in, what's going out, what you're spending, how much you're overspending, how much you're getting into debt. Creating a will and a power of attorney is really important early on. It's just kind of, if nothing else, it's saying to you, I am in control of my future, of where I want this to go. I'm earning it. I'm going to say where it goes. Checking your superannuation is really important because you want to make sure it's relevant. There's no use getting to years down the track from here and you've only ever been in a really low growth option when really maybe you should have been in something more aggressive potentially, that's up to you to decide on. Checking your death benefit nominations. You might think these things are obvious, but you'd probably be surprised on the stats that show people don't actually actively select that. Creating a savings plan while you're young, I think, is really important to impart on people. It's often recommended by financial advisors to have 6 months of savings. I mean, but I just think of that figure and I think, I don't know how realistic that is for people. Do you? Do you have 6 months? I don't. So make what's relevant to you, but I think create a buffer. For me, I think I'd be doing pretty good if I got 2 to 3 months. I think I'd be happy with that. What's happy for you and makes you feel in control of your situation will help you to progress. Tick the box. Invest early. Now, there are so many great opportunities to do this, and there's a lot more being written about how you can invest, whether it's a first home buyer's grant in property, whether there's all these new apps that allow you to invest automatically with small change, even with topping up your super at the moment. And younger generations, they're particularly aimed at women and they're aimed at millennials because they're thinking they're more digitally savvy, but by no means shouldn't you use those later. But I think that they're really good to have a look at when you're younger. Now, the thing about this age group in terms of the progress for women is that when women are aged 18 to 24, they're doing still more unpaid work than men. But the good news is they're doing about 26% less of it than they were a decade ago. So that's a good thing. An increasing number of women are studying at tertiary level after high school, more so than men. I think it's about 43 to 25% for men. But where they're going is primarily society and cultural studies. And then after that, it's management and commerce. And then after that, it's health. So health, we know, is the biggest employer of women, but it's actually not the most popular course to study. This is changing all the time, and I find this really interesting because with all this awareness around what women are getting paid and where's the money, we're seeing a growing number of women move into courses linked to higher paying industries. So this is happening, and these are also highly transferable skills when you look at IT. So the rolling 5-year enrolments, up 71% for women in IT studies. Now that's off a low base, but that's really quite interesting when you think of where women are going, and when you correlate that to what is one of the highest paying sectors or professions in terms of IT skills, it's not hard to see what's happening here. The greater awareness, women are kind of saying, where can I go to earn a bit more? Interestingly, engineering is also attracting a lot more enrolments. And we know there's a real push on in schools to get more women into STEM subjects. So that to me looks like it's working. And interestingly, it's the only field where there's a gender pay gap on the flip side, where women are coming out of studies when they're younger and they're actually earning more than men. And we think that's because when women are studying in many of these technical fields, there's data that shows that they actually tend to study at a higher qualifications, like the management position. Maybe they're not wanting to do on the ground, or there's a bit of thinking around that. So maybe those skills are more highly valued, and maybe there's a bit more of demand to get gender diversity in male-dominated industries to affecting the salary outcomes there for graduates anyway. So this is quite interesting for me. The other stat that doesn't quite show up here is the number of men enrolling in health studies is increasing, and we're seeing that translate too into the workforce as well. So there's a bit of a shift happening there. When we look at the career phase for women, now, as I said, this can go on and on and on. For me, it's really never felt like it's stopped. I always find this really interesting because when you think about your grandmothers and the lives they lived. For my grandmother, she'd never worked outside of the home. She never wanted to. That was her choice. But I never grew up thinking that would be me. And I think of my daughters. So for them to think in time that they're dreaming of these careers And for them to think in time that they'll take career breaks, we don't know, but that might be quite foreign to them. And thinking how that's going to, the workforce is changing so rapidly. I think sometimes we need to think about what this model is going to look like for these younger generations, millennials and Zs. It's going to be interesting. So women 25 to 44 are doing less unpaid work than they used to, about 12% less. That said, the amount of unpaid work they do increases significantly from this age group on. It pretty much doubles in comparison to men. That has to be affected by, we see more women move into coupled relationships. Women are having children around the age of 31, men 33. The average age for marriage, I think, is about 30. So there's that dynamic happening there, having children. There's a lot of things that affect that. This age group is also the period where women are the most active in the workforce. There's over about 1 million women in full-time work in this age group. Healthcare, as we've said, is the biggest employer of women, and that's despite a moderation in the number of women in full-time work in the health sector since the start of this year. The other thing that's happening for women in the career phase is this board story. Just flick through that one. So nearly 30% of female directors on ASX top 200 boards. It's not enough. It's not enough because you can't be what you can't see. The role of role modelling in getting more women into senior management, I think as it stands is about 39% as measured by WGEA for its companies, is we don't have enough women in management, and there are fundamental structural problems there that I think are a lot related to the amount of support women get to get back into the workforce after career breaks. Gender stereotypes, choice is a factor you can't rule out. There's a lot going on. For women in this phase, it's really important to invest in your personal development. It doesn't stop with your first qualification. It's personal training days, it's networking events, it's growing your skill set and staying relevant, especially if you are thinking that at some point of having children, it's putting a plan in place to help you continue your progression so you don't completely lose out like many women feel like they have a bit. And I will say there, I am a mum of 3 girls who I absolutely adore. I haven't lost out by taking career breaks. It's not that. But when we become informed about the things that we can do, I'm saying you can do them while also having that choice to protect yourself. So be savvy too at this phase about negotiating your pay. There's a lot of talk that women don't speak up enough about, ask for pay rises, or they're more likely to accept flexible work arrangements over pay rises. Then there's research that says, well, hang on, actually women are asking for pay rises, they're just not getting them as much. Why is that? It's debatable, that research, I think. What's important is to put yourself forward, to present a business case for why you should get a pay rise that benefits you and the business. Be solutions focused in that. It's not just about you think it's time, you've recognised, for instance, if there's a gap, or you've recognised that you've been there a long time. It's about approaching it as it's a business plan and putting it forward. That's to help you increase your chances of a pay rise. So without question, your pay and your ability to earn an income is absolutely integral to your financial progression. And so front and centre must be in your mind, when's it time for my pay rise? When's it time? What can I be doing? Is there a side hustle I can be doing? That kind of thing, thinking about boosting your income. Invest or top up your superannuation with a pay rise or a bonus. Just keep that superannuation conversation going. I am really big on having that across all life stages, and it's not just because Q Super's here, but it's because if we're not doing something along the way, we do face this gap at the end, and we're about closing that gap and protecting you into retirement, so you're not among the statistics that are sadly, and I know many women facing that, who are couch surfing, who don't have much superannuation, who have spent their superannuation to pay off credit card debt. You know, some situations are really horrible, and we want to try and protect ourselves the best we can with the knowledge and the insights that we have. Rechecking your superannuation, gosh, my mum was one of these people where she just let the insurances go, and before she knew, when she was made redundant, the insurances alone had wiped up about $6,000 of her balance, and that was over a 2-year period, and I think that was pretty significant. So it's just a matter of keeping aware, and that was money she never got back, because of course that was your fault, you ticked the box. So it's a matter of keeping yourself engaged with the detail. It's your detail. Now, as I said, the participation rate, full-time job, that we've had this upward trajectory for women. It has moderated, but we're progressing. More women in the workforce means more women are earning an income, and that's what's affecting the gender pay gap. That's why that's coming down. That's why the superannuation gap is coming down. That's a factor helping women progress financially. When life calls, career breaks. Without a shadow of doubt in my mind, career breaks have the biggest impact on a woman's financial progress. This is a point that you can, if you're thinking of having children, if you're in the midst of a career break, stay engaged with your superannuation, keep topping it up. It might only be $5. I think I heard a great stat the other day that someone was putting, if you put $5 a day into your super fund, and this is through your salary sacrificing, through your employer super fund contributions, that by the end of 10 years you could have actually added $180,000. But it's sometimes just getting in your mind the concept that that's too small, it's not going to make a difference. It actually really can make a difference, especially when you have employers increasingly starting to pay super on parental leave, starting to take the gender out of it, so men are getting it too. So when we start to change the conversation there to benefit everybody, we start to get more progress all round. So superannuation is a big one on career breaks. Keep your foot in the career door. And this might mean staying engaged with staff training days, staying engaged with just colleagues, keeping your skills relevant, keep your educational qualifications up to date. Industries are changing so fast. I knew a friend who was in marketing, and she took a career break, and by the time she came back, was an executive, but by the time she came back, this role of social media had fundamentally changed the marketing world. And if you weren't engaged with what was going on and how to navigate it, you're really you're missing out. And you want to make sure that if you do have intentions about getting back in, even if part-time, casually, that you want to give yourself the best chance. So this information is just about giving yourself that best chance. Again, checking your insurances during this period, because you might be no longer earning that huge salary. So if you need that money, super funds, insurers may not pay out for what you think they will if your salary has fundamentally changed on a career break. So this is something that some people tend to forget. I'd urge you to have a look at it if you're in that career break stage. Think about family health insurance. You know, I remember when I had children, I was all in to have hospital cover and everything, private all the way, blah, 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 for my kids. And then I realised I kept paying for that for years, and I didn't really need all these add-ons. So changing that and working out how much extra you're paying, and of course staying on top of your debts. So women in this age group, it tends to be between 35 to 44 that we see a lot of the impact of career breaks really come through. We see the superannuation gap widen from a very small 3% for women and men, 18 to 24. It then widens to 34% by the age of 35 to 44. Significant. And it's significant because of the impact primarily of career breaks and the changing work patterns. And now this is despite growing awareness around job flexibility and more progressive companies helping women, paying on parental leave, providing flexible work. Many of us are still struggling, though, when we're on career breaks to actually find employers that can do that. So it's still a conversation that's going on all the time. Women in career breaks are also far more likely than men to be working part-time and in casual employment too, which again affects that gender pay gap story. The level of unpaid work, this is a nice little chart. Between the ages of 35 and 44, we can see that women are doing about double the amount of unpaid work to men. This is affected by the role of caring. You might be caring for elderly family. In the sandwich generation, you're caring for kids as well. You're doing housework, you're doing organising, all these different things. This is time that sometimes we're getting better at. Statistically, it is narrowing, and men are doing a little bit more at the same time. But as women, there's an element of choice in here. Many women want to be the primary carers. So when I present these statistics, I don't want you to think, oh God, it's all just so unfair, isn't it? There's a lot that goes into the unpaid work dynamic. It's about asking you what's fair and right for you and your situation. How does your household work? How much of your time is in unpaid work, but is it valued unpaid work? And these are critical questions to ask yourself when it comes to unpaid work. Nearing retirement. So this is a phase where we know that women aged 45 to 64 are actually doing significantly less unpaid work than they used to. And I was saying to someone the other day, I think that women are getting older and they're just saying, oh, get it yourself or something like that. It's just this real sense of, there's this real drop off in the level of unpaid work between your kids and partners or elderly parents. I don't know. There's a real change happening in older women that are just saying, I'm just not. So it really drops there. And at the same time, which correlates with that, is we're seeing more women participate at a faster rate in the paid workforce. This is the fastest rate of growth among women employed full-time is happening in women over 55 engaging in the workforce, while they're not doing as much unpaid work. So you can really see the impact of unpaid work on your capacity to earn money, to keep yourself progressing. And I think we probably get to this age where we're just like, well, I need to focus on this now, and that's kind of what's happening for many women. The gender gap, however, at this age group is sitting at about 26%, so women having about 26% less super than men. That has improved over the past quarter in particular. We're seeing women take advantage of more strategies to top up their superannuation, particularly women with self-managed super funds. And we're seeing women, of course, having to work longer out of financial necessity. Apparently we're going to live to at least 85 now, so and we're not retiring to at least 70, some of us, so there's a need to just keep on keeping on. So what could you be doing to help your financial situation in this age group? I think this is a period where prioritising your spending becomes really important, seeing where you can save money, seeing what's no longer as important to spend on as it used to be. Even things as simple as, this is really simple, but borrowing library books as opposed to buying books. Looking at ways to protect your income when income may be tight. We know that it doesn't really matter if you're earning $50,000 or $150,000, it's how you spend it, how you spend and how you invest it that can determine your wealth. You know, it's often said that, you kind of think the more I earn, the more I'm going to be able to do this and I'll invest that there and I'll invest. It doesn't really work that way. It's in the mindset and when you start, when you actually start. Boosting your super, yes, there's lots of strategies to help you do that. You've probably heard quite a few. Again, I can talk offline about those, but there's spousal contributions as well. There's topping up your super. There's using little apps that'll help you do it a little bit easier now. And the other thing too is if you're thinking that you're approaching retirement and you're just not going to have enough, I'm not a subscriber to the view that it's just a waste of time, super, or it's just give up. I'm just not wired that way. Find your sweet spot with earning an income and the age pension. And I spoke to a financial planner the other day about it, and they were advising one person that the sweet spot was around $30,000 that allowed them to keep earning but allow them to get the age pension. So it's a matter of looking at your options about what's available and the plan that you want to create for yourself, how much you need to retire off, being smart with your money, using the pension, still working. We know that those over 50s are still in the workforce. There is work there. There is demand there. I'm not saying it's not hard, but there is work there, and making the most of it. Also relevant, your wills and power of attorney in this point in time. Elderly abuse is very real. If you don't plan your retirement, rest assured someone else is going to plan it for you, and it might not be what you want. So this is a really important thing that I have to stress at this point in time. And if you do have any cost savings that can be directed, that are no longer for the mortgage, or they're no longer to those library books or whatever, that can go into other investments or to something else, be savvy on that too, and don't be afraid to start small. Just start, just chip. This is one chart. I'll start to wrap up now, but there's one chart here. If you look at just the top bar, this orange line, that orange line, starting at 100, is actually reflective of women over 55 in the Australian workforce. That's how active women in this age group are becoming out of financial necessity, out of living longer, and I would say also out of demand. And I'm really encouraged by that, because I have no plan stopping into my 50s. This is what the gender pay gap, the gender gap in superannuation has been doing. It's actually been falling over the past, well, really since the past, nearly a decade now. So this is something to be encouraged by, and it's a reflection on that increased participation in the full-time workforce, earning more. It's having an impact. So don't ever feel that by you still going in the workforce and earning a bit more or investing a bit more or putting into your super isn't having an impact. It can have an impact, and it does have an impact. Now, there's just a few money tips that I'm just going to leave on the screen, really, because I can talk ad nauseum with tips that you can do. The key takeaway for me in trying to encourage women to think about their economic progress, their financial well-being, is to take action, is to chip away at your own progress, is to have faith, is to face those horrible voices of fear that you might be telling yourself or someone else could be telling you, and actually just use that as inspiration to do. And even if you just take a couple of little steps, those steps are so much better than doing nothing, and the power and the confidence that can come from them, I'm telling you, I'm measuring it every quarter. It's happening. Women are progressing. Things are getting better. But we have to keep pushing each other along and believing that chipping away is making a difference. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bianca. I think what you talked about really epitomised everything about why we started She's on Q in the first place at Q Super, and a couple of things really resonated with me, which is you earn what you learn, and empowering women to feel confident around their finances to really start making financial progress and chipping away. So yeah, if She's on Q is helping go some way towards that for all of you, then we're on to the right thing. So thank you. We're now going to open up to the floor for some questions. Who's going to kick us off? We got a microphone? Oh, hang on. We'll start the microphone.
So if I can use this. Bianca, thank you. I got a lot out of that. You mentioned a few times about being savvy about your super. Despite working in sort of professional services myself, I actually don't know how to compare super. Do you have any tips for knowing that you're in the right fund?
Yeah.
And what are those sort of indices or indicators that I'm in a good fund or not?
It is so difficult to get that information, and the super funds like to complicate it by saying there's no apples and apples, and there's no apples and apples. It's because they all have their portfolio managers and investment managers that structure funds differently. There are websites though like Chant West, super ratings. There is, I think CanStar and Finder.com also do comparisons for superannuation funds. What's really important is you knowing what your investment strategy is. If you're a balanced option or if you're aggressive, then you want to be comparing that's how you would do it. So be comparing those aggressive type funds. Also Australian Ethical, I think, also compares certain funds as well. But it's not easy, and you have to dig around and research it. And when you're doing it, have your own statement for your own fund there so you know what you're looking at. Also look at fees. Fees can be like, what does that mean? And are they buried in there or what? It's a bit of legwork for you to do, but I promise you, once you start on that path, you will feel like you're better able to compare. But there are definitely websites that you can do it. It's just, you'll have people say along the way that it's not going to be absolute, but do it by the approach of an investment strategy. I can't tell you what the best super fund to be in is, but I can say that Chant West, and in particular Chant West, will publish who's been the top performer once a quarter. So I might have to write something on my site about that. So every quarter, so look at chantwest.com.au and they'll tell you what's been the best super fund, best performing super fund per different type strategy. Yeah.
Yep. So the easiest way to do that is just go on the QSuper website, type compare into the search bar, and it will, after a couple of clicks, link you to the Super Ratings website. So it's independent. It is done by Super Ratings. You'll be able to compare up to 3 funds side by side, and they'll compare on a variety of different metrics. So they'll look at fees, they'll look at investments, insurance, governance, sort of member services and that type of thing. So it can give you a really good comparison between one fund versus another.
And there are more, like a lot of these funds are becoming a little bit more accessible. Like there's a few women's funds that have opened up. Some people aren't interested in being a women's only fund, but some are. And there are, I know Verve, I won't go into details, but there are lots of other super funds that actually do, as well as QSuper, that actually provide education around understanding it and picking that up. It's just a matter of kind of saying, I need a bit of help here. Can you give me a hand?
On superannuation still, you talked about reducing some of those fees that you pay, or I think like the insurances and things like that. I think a lot of people, and I certainly do, just think there's no options at all. That's your super fund and whatever. Is there actually a way to opt out of things? Like, is there things to opt out of that you shouldn't be paying for or checking if you're paying for? Or is it just dependent on the fund?
Well, that's all changing now, the whole opt-in. You've got to opt in to insurances. Unless you're stuck in an insurance. I have to double check that. We might have to double check that.
So on the topic of obviously QSuper's insurance, generally, and I'm imagining the majority of people in the room are employed by Queensland Government, generally for those working arrangements, income protection, death and total and permanent disability insurance is automatically provided to our members. Obviously at any stage, should you wish to cancel, decrease, make any amendments, there's lots of personalisation options with regards to that, and that's something that you can easily check through your own member online account at any stage and make those relevant changes. So there's QSuper and the insurance that we automatically provide, but at the same time, come the 1st of July, which has obviously just passed, there were a lot of legislative changes changing super and insurance in general. That's also going side by side. So really, it doesn't matter what super fund you're with, it's all about ownership. It's all about making sure that you understand that this is your money and it's something that is so incredibly important for you to be involved and take an active interest. So to understand the investments, the fees, the insurance that you have, but also to check in periodically and as your circumstances change, make sure, particularly with insurance, that you and your family are adequately protected, because it can obviously lead to some really adverse consequences. So, moral of the story: every super fund is different. Within Q Super, obviously, we are providing insurance. We're certainly able to have those conversations with you afterwards, but the easiest way for you to see what you've got is log into your member online account, and there's certainly lots of steps that you can take from that point.
Sometimes it's a little bit of work, the paperwork to do, but I'm sure maybe Q Super is a lot easier, but I'm with a different fund, and I found that was a bit of work, and I actually had to get a bit of help myself to figure out how to change my insurances. So don't be disheartened if you can't find what you're after, but just try and seek help if you can't quite figure it. You need to make an adjustment rather than let it slide. Thank you.